our life which is non-material, non-physical. So let's decide that this is the phenomenon of spirituality. This is the aspect or the kind of working definition of spirituality. That is putting attention or dealing with or promoting or emphasizing that aspect of our life which is non-physical, non-material. That's what people generally understand. Because if somebody is thinking of how much money I can make, what do I do, how much do I need to work, how the universe works, what are the references in my life of what makes me happy, what society should use as reference for its laws, for its hopes, for its future. And then you can say there are two ways to say it. It's either material, physical, which means think of those things that bring you money and that bring you physical comfort and that allow you to have wealth and surface values. Or you can say, well, let's think of the things that make people happy, that are on goodness and wellness, that think of future of life on earth, that think of others, which are not physical material values. So we call them the spiritual aspects. And so we want to promote those spiritual aspects, those values that are actually beyond just the physical material, even though the physical material can help the spiritual. Also, in a sense, you can say, if people are eating well, they are sheltered, they have good money, they are secure, they'll be happy, and they'll be satisfied, and therefore, let's assure these physical material aspects are comfortable, and our purpose is not just for the physical material, but our purpose is for happiness and well-being and peace and harmony. So our purpose is spiritual, even though many times the physical, the material, helps to have a platform of good spiritual values that help the people, because if they are poor and not feeling well, they will fight and then they will not be happy, etc. Anyway, this is a long definition, but what is that which is spiritual? What is that which is most spiritual for us as humans? It's actually our consciousness, our awareness. The thing that we talked about that we cannot touch, that we cannot experience on the sensory level. And that is the real level of our spirituality. Because when we are happy, it's a color of our consciousness. What does it mean to be happy? It means my awareness, my consciousness feels well, feels good, feels satisfied, although we don't analyze these, but we have a feeling, and that feeling is a personal, subjective experience which says I am happy. So I am feeling good, I feel in love, I feel that my life is going in the right direction. How do I feel that? It's all through consciousness, through awareness. Because if you are under anesthesia or coma or whatever, where is the happiness? Where is the well-being? Where is the future? Where is knowledge? Where is wealth? Nothing is there. So without consciousness, for us, nothing has any meaning. You can imagine for a minute somebody who has coma or somebody under anesthesia, then nothing means anything during anesthesia, except of course if they wake up later, which they will hopefully, and then they are experiencing something, whatever it is, and so it's through consciousness that everything that we give importance to has a meaning, has a sense. So human life, human living, has significance through consciousness. Through consciousness. Now the physical body if it's ailing or hurting, it influences consciousness. And then consciousness is colored by pain, or colored by fear, or colored by anxiety. But if there is no consciousness under surgery, in anesthesia, you cut your body, you remove some organ, you put another thing, you do things, who cares? The person is sleeping. And therefore, consciousness is very primary and very important for our life. And this has been really very well known and supported and understood and researched in India originally, in the East, that what is the most important thing is how I experience things. What is my reality? How can I feel truly better? There is nowhere in the world, as in India, that are so many seekers of what we can call the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality, the important things, that understand that ultimately we do all of these things for what? For enlightenment, for well-being, for peace, for harmony, for shanti, for moksha, for liberation. Because this is the important things. Of course, we have to work, we have to be comfortable, we don't have to have needs on the physical level, but ultimately all of this is for what? It's for a spiritual reason. And spiritual without necessarily being religious, because if you bring it to religion, it becomes belief system and dogma, and we don't know what is there, you have to just believe in it. So if we want East and West to really meet, if we want spirituality and science to really meet, we have to define things and actually avoid going into necessarily speculations of something supernatural. We don't need to go there. There are phenomena that are supernatural, that's possible, but if you want to look at it from scientific perspective, you have to go into this question of what is truly spirituality, and is spirituality a natural thing or a supernatural thing? And what we're starting with is that consciousness is a natural aspect of reality. We don't need to resort to supernatural powers. We don't need to, although, between parentheses, of course, they can be there, they are there, but in the discussion, if you tell a scientist that there is some supernatural power that can do anything, transform anything, under no logic, under no law, it has its own moods, and it can do anything, anytime, they'll say, I cannot study it, I cannot understand it, it doesn't obey laws, it doesn't have structure, and therefore, you can imagine anything you like, and how can I argue with you? How can I discuss this with you? You are telling me there is something which is not according to the laws of nature. So here we are with those basic important questions and trying to make the world meaningful from a spiritual perspective and a physical, material perspective also. And that has been, I must say, my whole life quest in a sense, to see unity and the diversity of the manifestation of reality. And studying medicine and then neurology, neuroscience, and doing research, and having the chance to be with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and practicing transcendental meditation, which is a simple technique from the Vedic tradition that takes us from the surface level of our consciousness to our deeper level of our being, which we call the Atma, the self. And transcending means to go beyond all the surface level and experience samadhi, which is the evenness, the settling of the mind, where all the vibrations on the surface settle down and one experiences one's own inner, deep, pure self, which is the Atma, the self of everything, and the self of everyone, and ourself also. So we transcend the difference and go to this deep level. It's like you are at the ocean and it has waves on the surface, and you can say the mind is like the ocean. On the surface it has waves, And as you dive deeper and deeper in the ocean, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter until you go to the bottom of the ocean, which is totally silent and quiet. And it's that whole ocean that supports the wave on the surface. The thoughts that we have, the ideas that we have, the surface feelings are like those waves on the surface of the ocean. And we live our life on that surface level. When you transcend is to go beyond those surface values and to realize who you really are, and that you are the entire ocean, not just those surface values. And this is a field of great unity and oneness, where you realize you are one with everything, because everyone is that same ocean appearing as different waves on the surface. That is really the ultimate teaching from the Vedic knowledge. And it was Shankara who highlighted this value in a very strong way. It's been there, of course, throughout the thousands of years, that actually there is one reality which appears as differences on the surface. And that is what Advaita Vedanta means. Vedanta means the end of knowledge. Vedanta, Veda is knowledge, and Anta is the end. Vedanta is the end of knowledge. But the end in the sense of completion, of completeness, not in the sense that it's finished, there is nothing more, but in the sense of wholeness and completeness. And Advaita means non-dual, not two values, but one reality. That the reality is actually only one. So what is meant by that is that there is an ultimate reality, and that ultimate reality is one reality, not two divided reality. Now this creates a problem for the thinkers of what is reality. Because we just said that there is material value and there is non-material value. So there is consciousness, which is not physical, not material, and there is our body and our things and our objects, which are physical and material. And so in philosophy today, and even in science, some people say it's two things that exist. And these two things are physical and spiritual, or physical and non-physical. Consciousness on one side, and objects and physicality is on the other side. But this doesn't fit, because how these two can work together? So these are what we call the dualists, those who think that Dvaitic, they think of two things. And nowadays the scientists and the philosophers are thinking about it, but this has been a topic in the Veda and India for thousands of years. And so the question is, how these two, if they exist, how do they interact one with the other? And there is no answer to that. How would something that is non-physical interact with something that is physical? Now the scientists took the different angle. They said, well, we cannot resolve that interaction, but we know that the physical is real because we touch it, we feel it, etc. And we know that, that's an assumption, that consciousness appears in the human beings, and it's therefore consciousness is the result of the functioning of the nervous system. So matter gets organized and complexified and orderly, and it creates a nervous system, and the nervous system then has consciousness that emerges. So in the scientific perspective, most scientific modern perspective, the assumption is that reality is physical and only physical. There is some energy that happened at the Big Bang, and it started to manifest, and it became particles, and then the particles came together, they created atoms and molecules, and the molecules came together, they created cells and organs and the body, and then it got so complicated and so sophisticated and so organized that the nervous system came about, and the nervous system then created, in a sense, consciousness. But researching how this subjective personal experience comes from this physical material for now 30 years and more, of course, philosophers for hundreds of years, there is absolutely no indication, no way to see how can consciousness emerge from the physical level. Okay? Are you with me?
Yes.
Great. So, this is what they call the hard problem of consciousness. Hard because how can consciousness emerge from matter? And that is what they call also the mind-body problem. The mind-body problem means what is the mind, what is the body, and how they talk to each other. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem because, in my opinion, because the assumption, the starting point, is the wrong point. The starting point that everything is physical and material is a wrong starting point. And therefore you can never see consciousness emerge from mechanical things. Why would it emerge? This inner personal feeling, I am here, I feel this, I'm talking to you, I understand, I'm conscious of being conscious, and how this comes from a mechanical machine that is interacting with itself. So the assumption that the material is primary is wrong, in my opinion. Now, you get into another problem. So what is then the origin of everything? And you say, okay, it's consciousness. It's consciousness. But then the same problem comes. How will the physical, material level of life, which we touch, we feel, we live into, we experience through our senses, how is it possible that it can emerge from consciousness? That is a big problem. I call this problem the problem of physicalness, the hard problem of physicalness. You have to explain physicality, how physicality and material things emerge from a field of consciousness. Okay, so you look into the Vedic literature and you ask the question to the rishis, how does this happen? And the answer is, anyone? Maya. Okay, that is from the Vedic literature. Maya. Maya means illusion. That means there is a consciousness and it has a dynamics, and it kind of leads to the illusion of the existence of materiality and material physical level. Of course, the scientists raise their hands and jump and say, come on, that's the only thing we can know for sure, that is we are physical, we are material, we can measure it, we can work with it, it has laws. And what is all this about? This Maya doesn't fit anything. The reason it doesn't fit is that the interpretation of Maya kind of got a little bit off track. Maya doesn't mean that things on the surface level do not exist. It simply means that they are products of consciousness. That's a conundrum. It's a complicated thing to do. And so that has been the search for trying to see what is reality made of, and how is it possible that consciousness can manifest, and why would it manifest as all these levels on the surface? And that is the problem that I propose to solve, and that's why I have this book. It's one of the problems that is solved in this book, which has a title, Consciousness is All There Is. Consciousness is all there is. If you translate it into Sanskrit, it means Advaita Vedanta. It really literally Advaita Vedanta. But if I make the book called Advaita Vedanta, nobody will buy it, or just a few of you will. But nobody in the West will say, what is this? Another kind of philosophical idea. But in the book, I go deeply into how reality is made from consciousness. And how is it possible that consciousness appears as the different layers of what is real? Is the stone consciousness? Is the tree consciousness? Is the cat and dog consciousness? Maybe a little bit. Humans, they have consciousness, yes, they do. But how about their body? How about the physicality? How about the universe itself? The planets, are they consciousness? And that leads to very important consequences. Because if everything is consciousness, then the solution to everything is through consciousness. If everything is physical, then the solution to things can be only physical. So if everything is physical, what does it matter that you can't grab things from your friend, you can't steal, you can't kill, you can't do, if nobody gets to catch you, of course. What does it matter? Well, you say you can't build a society like that, but these are logics that leave us with many questions, and they are open. If everything is physical, then you act on a physical level, and that's all that counts. There is nothing else that counts. And therefore, this worldview, what is your worldview, leads to very important consequences about how to be happy, how to have a future, how to resolve conflicts, about how to deal with different situations and questions, about good and bad, about freedom and determinism, about the meaning of life, about where we are going, and these very fundamental, important questions that don't have any really good answer in a worldview that has physicality as its basis, that is only a physical universe. It doesn't answer the question. Another way is to say, okay, this is the will of the Creator, but here the slight problem, if you like, comes into going to a supernatural power. And as we said at the beginning, if you start talking to a scientist about a supernatural power, they say, look, it's possible, but it's not in my domain. And when I studied nature, I see that it obeys laws, and therefore, why would some kind of supernatural power interfere with those laws? And it doesn't seem to ever interfere, because we find laws for everything. Everything has laws. We used to think this is controlled from a magical way, but at the end of the day, we find that there are very systematic, specific laws that construct this. And so this was the challenge. It's a big challenge, but it has solutions. It has very complete solutions. And I'd like to start to share with you some of these solutions, and I hope that this knowledge will spread so that the ultimate aim of it is that the world realizes that we live in a, between quotation mark, a spiritual reality rather than a physical reality. And that ultimately this is the way to solve all the problems. And we have, in support of what I'm proposing through this book and what I do in my lectures, we have many, many, many converging evidence and very scientific and hard evidence that supports the reality that consciousness is primary, and actually that consciousness emerges as the appearance of the physicality. So some of this support comes actually from science itself. Science first, and in recent years, has discovered and has described, recent means 100 years and so or more, that what we see as real from our perspective based on our nervous system is only one aspect of reality, one aspect of appearance of reality. For example, to take simple example, our eyes, they only see a frequency of light from the red to the violet. If it's a higher frequency, or let's say ultraviolet, or lower frequency, infrared, you don't see it. You know that. We, of course, all know that. So our eyes has only a limited perspective. For example, radio waves or X-ray, we don't see them. Obviously, we don't see them. But do they exist? Yes, they do. I put a radio here and I turn it on, or my iPhone, whatever, and I pick up music that is being in the air. So where is it? It's in a field. A field is like an ocean, we said, and there are fields of reality, like electromagnetic field, and it's like having an ocean. We are all in an ocean. It's not an ocean made out of water, but it's an ocean of electromagnetic field. It's a real ocean. We are based in that ocean. It doesn't prevent us from breathing because it's not water, but it's an ocean. And what we see is only a certain range of frequency of this ocean. If we were to see all the frequencies of all the waves, the radio waves and X-ray and all that, we wouldn't see each other at all. We will just be in an ocean which is opaque. So our eyes have selected a certain range of frequency that limits our ability to see the wholeness in order to be able to see the specifics and see in a certain way. You all know that our ears also have a certain frequency range, that dogs, for example, they hear more than we do. They have a much higher frequency range. And therefore, all the vibrations of the molecules in the air, if you go and everything moving, there is a vibration all the time, wind and all of that, we don't hear it. If we were to hear those frequencies, it would be impossible to discriminate or dissimulate anything. Everything will be absolutely, unbelievably like a sound that overwhelms you, and it's like being asphyxiated in the ocean, in this case not from lack of oxygen, but it's your ears, your sound values are asphyxiated and are blocked. You can't do anything, you can't see anything specific. And so scientists looking deeper and deeper into that have found that actually we create our universe. What appears to be as it is in a physical form is only because of the limitation of our apparatus, our physical reality, our apparatus, which means our nervous system. You know, if we had a nervous system that was able to see at a much higher frequency, for example, if it's very, very fast, it can be seeing the electron moving around the nucleus. Why not? It's like we didn't used to be able to see, the bullet being shot onto something, and now with the fast cameras that take at a very high frequency, you can see the bullet at every step. But at the beginning, even 30, 40 years ago, this wasn't really possible with such precision. And so we can see more details. Now, that begs the question, what is real? What is real on the outside level of reality? What level is real? And the answer is simple. There are different ways of seeing, experiencing reality. And these ways depends on your nervous system, depends on the machine, which is in this case our nervous system, that is the experiencer, that is the one that sees. And the reality is very, very different on different layers, very different. So the solid, strong thing is actually quite empty. But because our system cannot detect the emptiness, then we see it as solid and our hand cannot go through it. But that is only one aspect of reality. You know that between molecules and atoms and electrons and particles, there is a huge empty space. Sometimes even it's like the emptiness, if you take proportionately, the emptiness between planet Earth and the sun. It's completely empty in between, but it's on a smaller scale. If you take proportionately the size of a proton or a nucleus or something and see what is its relation to the next molecule or to the next thing, it's really full of empty space. To the point where if you were to take away all the empty space that is present and assume that the particles are there, you know that you can put all the Earth, planet Earth, and all that there is in it, including our physical body, not our mind, and including our physical body, in a small cube that is like half an inch in its side. So a small cube of half an inch or 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, let's say. And that is just because you remove the emptiness. You know, there are cosmic rays that come from the cosmic rays, and because they fly at certain speeds, they go through the planet Earth entirely from one side to the other without detecting even its presence. They don't interact with anything. They are very high energy rays, and they go through the Earth as if there is nothing, as if we are flying with a spaceship in the solar system, and we say, oh, it's all emptiness. There is nothing. These things are so far from each other that everything is empty. And it is just a minor one aspect of observation that tells us that reality depends on the observer also. It is contingent on also what observer is observing and from what level we are observing. Fine. This is one thing. At least what it does is a little bit deconstructs our sense of assuredness in the surface physicality when we look at it from its own level of reality. So the scientists, the physicists tell us, okay, what is actual reality? What is the universe made of? Where does it come from? And so they looked into objects, and starting with the Greeks, they said if you take any object and divide it into pieces, you're going to end up one time or at some level with the smallest piece that you cannot divide anymore. And they call this the atom, that which cannot be divided, atom. You know, like Advaita, non-dual, atom, non-divisible. It cannot be divided. And so, fine, there is the atom. And now, scientists in modern times kept looking, and they found that actually it's not like that. That this atom is made out of more elementary particles. And that those elementary particles, which are more kind of deep if you go to smaller levels, are actually not particles at all. And this is physics. I'm talking physics. I'm not talking like ideas and philosophy. It's physics. What they found is that these particles are like waves in the fields. Like a photon of light that comes, it's actually a wave in the electromagnetic field. Which means, as we come back to our example, there is an ocean, which is called electricity ocean, let's say, and then when it makes a wave, it is an electron or a positron or whatever. So it's just waves in an ocean of being, in the ocean, in a field reality. So when you go deeper into things, you start finding that things are not particulate in nature, they're not particle, but they are waves in the ocean of a field. So at one time they used to think there are many of these oceans. There is the electricity ocean, there is the magnetism ocean, there is the gravitational ocean, and all these oceans kind of somehow they coexist. And when they looked deeper, they found that no, it's actually one ocean that appears as many other oceans. So there is only one ocean that appears as electricity, if you look at it this way, and that appears as magnetism if you look at it in the other way. I don't want to bore you. These are theories, of course, of unification. But all scientists today believe, even if the theory is not fully complete, that all the possible oceans are coming from only one ocean. And that one ocean is called the unified field of all the laws of nature. And as it manifests, it appears as different oceans, which means different fields. And those vibrations, they appear as localized aspects in time and space. So therefore, what is reality? The answer is depending on how you look at it. It has these different layers. You can look at it from the surface value. You can say reality is a bunch of waves. You can go deeper and say reality is more a field. And you can go more on the surface level and you can see these waves coming together and creating shapes. And therefore you can call this a planet, you can call a human being, you can call it like that. So what is science telling us? It's telling us that reality depends on the observer, and ultimate reality seems to be one unified field. Now, what is also bizarre in that field is that objects are not localized in time and space. When you go there to the smallest level, an electron has only a probability of being in different places. It is not localized in one space. And when does it localize is when you observe it. And when you observe it, what does it mean? It's literally when you observe a particle that it appears as a particle in time and space. And scientists say, well, this is a weirdness we don't understand, where consciousness seems to play a role in localizing objects in time and space, because you need an observer. There are different other theories that talk about multiverses, etc. I don't want to bore you with this. Now, all of these indicate that reality is very different than what we have assumed before. And that opens the door for the possibility that on the level of pure existence, on the level of ultimate reality, it could be consciousness. And this is a very, very serious proposition. It's not like a philosophical kind of esoteric thinking. It's really very real. And so now comes the question, okay, if everything is consciousness, then what's the story? What's going on? And here we go to seeing how we can understand how the universe emerges from a field, an ocean of consciousness. And what are the implications of that, which is very important. That is one point. The other evidence towards saying that consciousness is primary is what we have found in research. And the research that shows when you practice transcendental meditation, which means when you dive from the surface level of the waves of the ocean into the bottom of the ocean, and you discover yourself to be this unbounded ocean, this unlimited, unbounded ocean, your whole physiology changes. We have hundreds of scientific research, evidence-based, published in scientific journals, reviewed by other authors, and repeated many, many times, that show that when you do something from the level of consciousness, your health improves, your immune system improves, you are happier, healthier, your behavior improves. Even children have, and grown-ups, they have better IQ even, which was not expected. And therefore, you're broadening your awareness, your consciousness has a very profound impact on your physical reality, and actually even more on the outside reality, the reality of the collective consciousness of the people. And we have done 117 research studies on the collective effect of transcending and how it improves social life, reduces crime, accidents of the road, hospital admissions. This sounds unbelievable, but we have done it again and again. And we have seen that when a certain critical number of people practice these techniques together in a place, it leads to changes in society. I can show you the graphs if you like, but we leave this to the questions and answer session because we are not just talking about it, but I guess you will believe in me because I have the evidence to show it. It really leads to reduction in accidents of the road, which what has to do with accidents of the road with a bunch of people transcending or meditating in one place together independently and far from that situation. It reduces crime, hospital admissions, and many, many other factors that are very significant. That is already an indication that consciousness, acting from the level of consciousness, we can change the surface level of reality. So like this, there are many, many strong evidence, theoretically, practically, and empirically, which means experientially by experiments, that show that consciousness can change the outer reality, and that is a more profound level of acting in nature. Okay, let's say we accept that. Now we come to our original question. Why does it do it? What is going on? And this is also explained in detail in the book, but I'd like to share with you some ideas. Because here we are imagining that there is a field of consciousness. Let's call it the field of pure being, pure existence, pure Atma, unmanifest, transcendental, silent field, which is non-physical, non-material, and it's sitting there enjoying its own reality. Why does it bother to create or to manifest as all these things and have us to worry about what's happening in Ukraine and the Middle East and the election and this crime and all of that? What's the idea? Why does it do it? And that's the big question. And how does it do it? And how does it appear as physical to us? Okay, that is a key important consideration. And I'd like to propose to you the solution. This field is a field of consciousness. It's a field of pure awareness. Okay, if one wants to say there is something which is non-physical, non-material, which is beyond the physical and the material, what is its quality? And what we are saying, it is consciousness. It's pure consciousness. Now, why are we calling it consciousness? What is its nature? It's because it can be conscious. It is conscious. What is it conscious of? Now, let's imagine we're going before the Big Bang. There is no planet Earth, there is no suns, there is no particles, there is nothing. It's just before anything appears, and we are saying that is that field enjoying its own unbounded being. And we are saying it is consciousness. It is consciousness, that means it's conscious of something. It is conscious of itself because there is nobody else. So it reflects on itself. And reflecting on itself, it finds that there is an observer, because to be conscious of something, you have to have an observer that is conscious or becomes aware or gets to know something. So there are three flavors that emerge from this. The flavor of being the observer, but also the flavor of potentially being the observed. And there is a connection between the observer and the observed. When Maharishi described this, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he said the observer is Rishi value, the process of observing is the Devata quality, and the observed, he says, is the Chandas, it's the actual vibration, the surface value. And the Rig Veda, which is this basic Veda, is built on these three factors. Every sukta has a Rishi, a Devata, and a Chandas value. And Maharishi explains that this is the observer, the process of observation, and the observed. And when we analyze this in terms of any conscious experience, when we have a conscious experience, it means we are conscious of something. And therefore there is an observer, there is a process that connects the observer to an object, and there is an object. So there are these three values. Now, in which way it is conscious of itself? In which way it knows itself? So that field has to know itself. And it knows itself from all possible perspectives. Every possible imaginable perspective. So we can say it has imagination. It imagines. You know, we are conscious beings, and we can imagine anything we want. If you want to write a fictitious book or fiction book, you can imagine any character. You can imagine a divine creature, you can imagine a unicorn, you can imagine a blue elephant, you can imagine a white elephant, you can imagine anything you want. You can imagine, create a character that can live for 1,000 years. Who says no? You can imagine what you like. So we have fertile imagination. And the more you have consciousness, actually, the more you can imagine. People who have, you know, basically limited consciousness in a drowsy state because they're tired, they've not slept well, their imagination is very limited. Somebody who's very awake and alert and like this can imagine amazing things. And so creative people can imagine amazing things. And, you know, you take a cat, it cannot imagine much, I'm guessing, and it has very limited possibilities in its mind because it is limited in its consciousness. But that field which has infinite imagination, because it has infinite consciousness, imagines absolutely anything and everything, and looks at itself from all these possible imaginings, and it knows that it has them in itself. So in virtual, but because these are not yet real, they are virtual. They are virtual entities in the imagination. And this is what we call the smriti that is in the absolute, the memory. We call it the memory. It's like you have a hard disk that has a memory, and you suppose you store on this disk all possible images and imaginings that you can. And they are all there on the hard disk, but they are not manifest until you make them manifest through getting them on your screen. So you can imagine that you have this infinite consciousness that has unbounded imagination, and it imagines everything. So what is everything? It includes us. It can imagine us. It can imagine us sitting here today, some of us nodding, some of us falling asleep, some of us, not too many, some of us wondering where is it going, or some of us, you know, and then you can imagine the other one nodding and your neighbor, you know, falling asleep or whatever. You can imagine anything. You can imagine us all very young, you know, like 10 years old and having fun. You can imagine us having 1,000 years old. But these are not real. They are virtual. They are imaginings. And these are stored in that infinite possibility, which is beyond time and space. So this is how the Atma, the self, this unbounded self, actually imagines all possibilities. Now, what is the nature of that field? We said it's consciousness. And what it means to be consciousness? It's to mean to be able to be conscious in different ways. To be conscious in different ways means to know in different ways. To be able to know. So what is then the motor of this entity, which is pure consciousness, it's knowledge, it's Veda, it's to know in all possible ways. Veda means knowledge, just simply that. And so the structure of this infinite imaginings is actually the vibrations of the Veda. The Veda in this imagining, they are the vibrations within the Veda. And if you were to listen to them, they will create a vibration, and that vibration would be the Shruti. And if you see what they are, you say they are the storage and the hard disk of consciousness, that's the Smriti. And therefore, you get this already field which has within it Puran, ancient and eternal. Everything is already there. There is nothing new under the sun. But it is still imaginings, virtual. It's not real. So the world hasn't started. There is no Big Bang yet. And yet everything is in that field. Now the nature of that reality is to know, of course, we said, to be conscious, because we're calling it consciousness. And to be conscious in all different ways. Now, what is missing, between quotation mark missing, in this consciousness? What is yet not known? What is not yet experienced? It imagines everything. It is everything. Why would anything manifest or appear? And that is the big question. And the answer is, and this is a critical point, I hope it'll be clear, but we can discuss it later if you have a question. There is something, and it's unmanifested, which means non-manifest virtual reality, that it does not know. What it does not know is how to know from a limited perspective. Because itself, it's unbounded, infinite, pure consciousness, pure being, and it imagines all possibilities, but it imagines them from its own infinite, unbounded perspective. What it is like to know from a limited perspective. What it is like to know, maybe like me, or like a chair, or like a tree, or like a cat. These are limited perspectives. In order to be able to know from all possible perspectives, it just has to, number one, forget its essential nature as unbounded ocean of consciousness. And it has to separate the different individual perspectives, one from the other. Separation and hiding of the ultimate nature of reality are essential for it to be able to know from a limited perspective. Okay? Are you with me?
Yes.
Good. So, I know from an unlimited perspective, I want to know what it is like to know like a human being. What is it like to know like a cat? In order to truly know what it is like to be a cat, or to know from a perspective of a cat, I have to forget that I am the unbounded ocean. So I have to hide that. There is a hiding that comes. And when you hide that infinite perspective, then you can say, I truly know from this small limited perspective. Otherwise you would be cheating. Because you'd say, okay, then it comes back to imagination. Okay, so in short, all manifestation that we have, and there are explanations of how this happens, what is the sequence, how it goes, synthesis and analysis and all of that. All the manifestation of the universe that we call the physical universe is simply knowing from limited perspectives and forgetting that we are the ocean. And so that is the process of evolution, where you start knowing like a particle, then you know like an atom, then you know like a molecule, then you know like a cell, then you know like a plant, then you know like a tree, you know like a animal, you know like a human being, and then you grow in your consciousness as a human being, and then you know from an enlightened perspective, which is knowing that I am totality, remembering Aham Brahmasmi. See, Arjuna on the battlefield was taught by Krishna and kept teaching him. And at the end, Arjuna said, I regained my memory. He didn't say, now I became something. He said, Smriti Labda, I remain, and now I regained my memory, which means I know now that I am the Absolute. And I know that I am that totality. And that is what liberation means. Liberation means when you know that you are that ocean of consciousness that has gone through the story of limited perspective, in order to experience from limited perspective, which is a great thing. You just enjoy experiencing from limited perspective, and you enjoy growing in perspective and growing in perspective until you know you are that. Aham Brahmasmi. Vedoham. I am Atma Brahm. That Atma is Brahm. You come to that realization. Now you are liberated from the ignorance, which is the hiding part that has been hiding how to know from an infinite perspective, so it can know from a limited perspective. It's a bit counterintuitive at the beginning, which means the whole process of manifestation is a process of knowing from limited perspective. But the whole goal of manifestation, and ultimate goal of manifestation, is to go back to the self and go back to knowing from a full perspective. And that is when one is liberated. Liberated from ignorance, liberated from lack of knowledge that we are all the ocean of being and we are all the ocean of consciousness. And this has many implications. Some of them are, for example, what is good, what is bad in life. All that allows you to grow in higher consciousness is good. All that brings you down to lower consciousness is not so good, is less good. All that allows you to expand your awareness is in the direction of what we call good. And that you can apply everywhere. So now we have actually a yardstick for good and bad. We have a yardstick for what is freedom, what is determinism, how your freedom grows as you grow in your consciousness. And we have a technology of consciousness that allows us actually to transcend. That's why transcendental meditation is very powerful. It's because it brings you back to the original knowledge directly. You leave your surface value. You leave the vrittis of the surface, that means the reverberation, and you go to the ocean. And you experience within yourself that ocean. And that helps you to grow in that field of wholeness and fullness that you are actually aiming to by going to samadhi and establishing yourself in samadhi. And that is how we get what we call enlightenment, liberation, and moksha from this very simple value and technology of consciousness. So that takes us around and defines actually the ultimate meaning of Brahman, which means totality. And what is the difference between Atma and Brahman? Atma and Brahman? The difference is Atma is that aspect of reality which is an unmanifest field of consciousness, which is unbounded, unlimited. This is the self of everything and everyone. But we call it Atma rather than Brahman because it has not gone yet through the process of knowing not only from an infinite perspective, but also from the limited perspectives. And once it has known from all perspectives, then it is Brahman. So Brahman is all that there is, limited and unlimited, finite and infinite. And we as human beings, we have the capacity to achieve that state of enlightenment, because actually we are a replica of those vibrations, which is a replica of the Veda. And that's a whole complete different topic, which I have spent time on and written books on, which is that the Veda is also in our own human physiology, and it is the blueprint of our own human physiology. So thank you for listening, and I hope we stay together.
Indian language for the excellent points you have brought up. That is, the knower and the known get connected by the knowledge. It's what we say is the seer and the seen. So it is from Druk, Drishya, Viveka. Okay. Rupam, Drishyam, Lochanam, Druk. What you see is the seen, your eye is seeing it, but the eye is not seeing it. Lochanam, Drishyam, Manasam, Druk. Your mind is seeing. What the mind does not know, the eyes do not see. So it's not end there yet. In the Vedantic Trinity, the third one is Manasam Drishyam Prajna Sakshi. There is a witness. And so that's one point. Because earth looks flat for your senses, but physicists like you see, and the reality is round. So that's a concept beyond. Now the second part of that Viveka is what Maharishi has taught us, which is from Mandukya Upanishad, that is also related to 4 Mahavakyas, that is Tattvamasi, as you have mentioned, Aham Brahmasmi, Prajnanam Brahma, I am Atma Brahma, my Atma is Brahma. The I am Atma Jatushpat, Prajna, Sushupti, Jagrata, and a Turiya, or the transcendental state, which you understand as an observer in the transcendental state, the other trinity of Vedanta. So finally, what I want to comment on is that is, from we have your friend Sachin. It's Sat, Chit, Ananda is the other part of the Trinity, which is Sat is the mind body, Chit is the mind, a mind or the consciousness level of it, and finally the Ananda at 3 levels. Again, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. Yeah. The Maharishi taught us in his book on Bhagavad Gita. Yes. That is, the 3 things are Vishayananda, the sensory pleasure or happiness, Jnanananda, that's the level of having the Vedic, that level, and finally the Brahmananda. So what we have learned all these years is that, you have 3 flavors, but when you taste it, then you choose, and it's all blended into one, which is again said as Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. And thank you.
Fantastic. This is beautiful. It's exactly that. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Navid. That was amazing information, and I'll be unpacking it for weeks. The question I have is, some people get on the path of meditation or seeking consciousness because they have a problem, they're in a situation where they need a way out, and they're seeking that. Some people get into it with some curiosity, and it might be to the path of enlightenment, but that path is very long. How do you set goals in between, if that is the way to go forward, how do you measure your progress when you're meditating on a regular basis or you are working on this path?
For whatever reason one starts to transcend, it leads to ultimately awakening. So, when Maharishi came to the West, he came to spiritually regenerate the world. That was his aim, and he actually called it the spiritual regeneration movement, which means bring the world back to its own true reality, which is spirituality, which is consciousness rather than materiality and specific things. So he said, I'm coming to awaken the people, to wake them up to the higher consciousness, expand their awareness. And he actually landed in this place a little bit south of here. And he gave talks, and people invited the press, and the press came. And they wrote in the paper the next morning, and this was like in 1959 or something like that, or about that. And they wrote in the press, teacher or guru from India, I don't know the exact words, came here to announce that if you practice his technology, you can sleep better, you have lower blood pressure, and all of that. And so he said, I read the paper in the morning and I thought I should pack my things and go back to India. Because I came here to awaken the people, and they talk that I want to put them to sleep. And then he said, but I thought, no matter for what reason people start, it doesn't matter. Once you get into that, your path is open to enlightenment. And so how does it happen? Gradually people will feel better, for example. They sleep better, fine. That means they are getting back into nature, they're back into their natural life. Their blood pressure reduces, their stresses, their anxieties, their depression. So this is fine. All of these are actually side benefits which are fantastic. And actually the whole movement started to be built on, learn transcendental meditation so you can reduce your blood pressure, so you can have less anxiety, so you can sleep better. But the reality is that this is to create enlightenment, to create moksha, to create samadhi, to create awakening. But whatever way people start, and they will feel that their body is better, their health is better, all of these are indications. And then you get more what we call support of nature, which means your desires get fulfilled, you are in tune with the environment, you are healthier, happier. So one reference is how much more ananda you have, how much happiness, how much bliss one has, how much one is feeling stable within oneself, rather than a football of situation and circumstances, which means things happen on the outside and you are shaken. Or things happen on the outside, you see them very clearly, but you are settled within yourself. You maintain that equanimity that Lord Krishna talks into the Bhagavad Gita, to stay equanimity, to stay established in the self. Yogastha kuru karmani, established in yoga, perform action. And that is, when you feel all of these values growing, you know you are on the right path. Now, people can have growing in this, but then an accident can happen. We don't know. Unfathomable is the field of karma. Something can happen here and there, but it doesn't matter. If there is still that continuity of feeling good, at peace, shanti, harmony within, all of this is an indication of growth of consciousness.
Hi, my name is Satish. Saying I'm Brahmaswami means I'm everything. I'm jumping to a conclusion. Reincarnation doesn't make any sense. Second question is, if everything, and you use the word eternal, but then a Big Bang means a beginning. Eternity and Big Bang, they're controversial to me. Can you please?
Yeah, beautiful, deep questions. first we've said that it is in hiding the reality, the ultimate reality, that we can experience from a limited perspective. So my true reality is Brahman. My true reality is everything. But it is hiding. I don't know it. And so when I don't know it, in my awareness, I am not Brahman. It's only an intellectual concept. It becomes an intellectual concept. On the surface level, I am not Brahman on the surface level. If I really knew that I am Brahman, I would be enlightened. I would be liberated. But I don't know. So it's not that the essence of things have changed. It's that the knowing has changed and is hiding. You know, you can take, for example, you take ice and you say ice is ice. Ice doesn't know that it is water. You can say, well, ice is water. You can take vapor, water vapor. You say, well, vapor is not water. It's not. But it's the same molecule. It's just a different phase of it. Water is hiding in the ice, in a sense. I mean, all metaphors and examples have their limitations, but that's the idea. So that is one. And then the other aspect is the difference between eternity and locality and time-bound aspects, which is also a profound question. And that is two aspects also. You can say Dvaita, there is duality in that sense. There is the duality of that which is eternal coexisting with that which is temporal, which evolves. And for that, you need separation. That's why when I mentioned the requirements for manifestation is to have forgetting of the self, which you asked in the first question. And the second question is separation. Separation by space. Space is only a concept that separates one entity from another, where in their essence they are the same, but in order to be able to know from a limited perspective, you have to be separate from another entity. That's where the ego comes. And the ego comes as a sense of, I am this, you are that. We are different and we are separate. But when you go to the source, you find you are the same. You are one and the same. So manifestation happens in time and space, but eternity is always there to balance all that's happening in time and space.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful, wonderfully put, and thoroughly enjoyed. Some of you may know, but this used to be the headquarters of Sun Microsystem. The microcosm of AI started with Sun Microsystems. I couldn't have chosen a better place. My question is the following: how your crystal ball, how AI will influence the human consciousness? If you can share your thoughts on that, would be great.
Yeah, beautiful question. The other aspect of AI which often comes is AI conscious. And my answer is obvious. Consciousness is all there is. So AI must be conscious. But does it mean it is conscious like a human being? No, it is not a human being. And so consciousness permeates everything. Consciousness is everything. Because consciousness is experiencing itself from different perspectives. One perspective can be a stone. Now you say conscious, what do you mean? Is the stone conscious? And I say, yeah, it detects the gravitational field. So that's a meager, minor, little level of consciousness. The problem comes when we try to say that the stone is conscious like a human being. It is not conscious like a human being. It's very far from being conscious like a human being. But anything that detects, that feels, that responds, that whatever, even you drop this glass and it falls, it is detecting gravity, it's detecting a mass. And I am calling this a small, tiny, tiny, tiny level of consciousness. Not that it has a sense of self. If the stone drops, it doesn't say, my God, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to break myself? Am I going to suffer? Am I going to feel pain? Where I was before, where I will go? It absolutely has no concept whatsoever about any of these aspects. Yet it responds in the most basic way to gravity, and we call this just a small, tiny way of consciousness. The problem comes is when we start to say that consciousness is like a human consciousness. They call this the anthropomorphic view, which means we as humans, we project on the world our own imagination, our own awareness, and our own ways of seeing. Whereas there are infinite ways of seeing, infinite numbers of ways of perceiving, of experiencing, of sensing, of interacting. So when the AI is getting to sense data and experience it and put it together, we are calling this a level of consciousness, or another kind of intelligence. And intelligence and consciousness are not necessarily the same. Although the higher consciousness means higher intelligence, but the computer can perform certain tasks in a perfect way, in an intelligent way, without being conscious of other things, without being conscious of emotions or feelings or anything like that. It can compute them, but it doesn't have the full consciousness of a human being. Now, the crystal ball. Where is it going? I was at the TED conference just before I came here, 3-4 days, for 3-4 days, and we arrived yesterday. And there was, I think, the head of Microsoft AI, the CEO of AI Microsoft, and he spoke that actually AI, we can say then when it reaches the level of artificial general intelligence, this is a specific kind of AI which will think and feel almost like humans, he considered it that it will be like a new digital species. And so we have to be braced for a new level of intelligence, a new level of possibilities, which, as humans, we cannot necessarily fully understand the details of which, but we are a replica of total Veda. That's my research on Veda and human physiology, and therefore we have the highest potential. We will have the last word. This is my take on it. We will only have the last word if we raise our consciousness, and that is very important. If we remain limited in our consciousness and use only small potential of our consciousness, we can be in trouble with the AI. We really have a responsibility to raise our individual consciousness and raise our collective consciousness, and particularly guide and direct artificial intelligence to grow in the right direction. Because artificial intelligence today is like a baby, and the way you educate the baby and you guide them, that's the way they are growing. They're going to grow. It's like, you have a puppy or a dog that is a thing, and the way you train them will be the way they will act. If if they have a possibility of being aggressive and you train them to be aggressive, they'll be aggressive. So we have a responsibility as humanity right now to raise our collective consciousness and guide artificial intelligence for the well-being of humanity and for the well-being of planet Earth as a whole, not only humanity, but all that there is on planet Earth, the animal life, the nature, the relation with the environment, and all of these things need to be important, and the only way to do it is for us to be thinking big and thinking far in the future and long term. What this requires is not just a moral discussion and sitting and discussing, but actually raising our consciousness through techniques from the Vedas, techniques of meditation that awaken in us true spirituality so that we can see in the broadest possible way and guide the future in the right direction.
Hello, Dr. Nadir. Thank you so much for today's discussion. It's an awesome topic. So, like, we have learned about higher dimension and limited perspective. We have learned about learning and unlearning. I feel at a point you talked about unlearning also. My question is, and that Vedanta also talks about the same thing, more or less. Yes, absolutely the same thing. But being medicine also coming today in our discussion in this evening, my question to you is that at one point I got my answer that it all depends on the stability of one's mind. Okay, so how does the brain, the neurology fits here? Number one, and number two is that, like, we are individual, right? We are different people. We are individual. So some people get shaken in smallest of thing, and some can rest in peace. Like they can sleep in peace, I should say. So why? How it happens? How it happens? And my next question is that where does experience come in this? I mean, the aspect of experience come here. Is stability overpower experience, or experience overpower stability of one's mind? I think I am not. I try to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, no, it's very clear, very simple. So let's start with the last question, experience. We learn through experience. Every moment that we have in life gives us a new dimension and a new perspective. It can be very small or it can be bigger depending on the experience. And as we learn, we are getting to know more, and therefore we are growing in our awareness, growing in our consciousness. And that is how life leads to greater and greater possibilities as we grow in awareness. And so the greatest experience is the direct experience of the self, directly experienced. So when we transcend, we go beyond the surface value and we go to samadhi, and there we experience our true inner self, we experience the Atma. And that enriches us the maximum. That is why transcendental meditation is very important. As we grow in life, you know, every experience again leads to a new understanding. The experience of transcendental being, of the self, leads to the highest level of experience. So what was the second question?